Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Xibalba dev stream. Today, we'll be looking at the Embra Cyt, and we're already looking at the Embra Cyt, so I guess we're on track for today, huh? I guess we're actually doing stuff appropriately and correctly, which is pretty nice. Nice to be able to say that you did that. So today, I will be focusing a bit on general Embra Cyt development. If you missed it before, we do indeed have the Psychora, which are in the exact same position they were in 2 days ago, and the Ancifi, who are also in the exact same position they were in 2 days ago. The Embra Cyt are new, however. They are new around here, and they will probably receive another military, shall we say, combatant tech branch. But for the time being, we have a couple of things. I've tried to make it somewhat obvious what each individual section is, even though so far they all contain infantry and infantry alone. That will not stay the same forever, of course, but it is something that, for now, we're going to document. I will also bring up the scratch pad, the wicked pad thing, and then I will jump into Embra Cyt, and I will copy over that thing that I left in the Psychora section, which is branches, and then we'll say, I know that this is everyman, oddball, and mercenary. Heavy hitter, tech from other sources. We got, we'll say, well-rounded conventional options, specialized, trying to think about a good term for these guys, but really oddball is the term, isn't it? So we'll just say specialized combatants from more estranged, we'll say stranger members. Okay, so yeah, ultimately what we're getting at here is the idea that we will be able to quickly develop these sorts of core identities for the different regencies. I actually haven't updated the main page. If I go to, where is it? No, it's way down here, isn't it? It's this one or this one. Here we go. So we could grab this and go to Embra Cyt, and then grab this. Embra Cyt. I'm not actually sure if this URL works. I think it does. It looks to work over here. So, add link to Embra Cyt tech map. I believe there's no BR. Yeah. So anyway, now if we jump to the Xibalba page, here you go. You see the tech map. Brilliant. So I guess I'll do a bit of an introduction to the Embra Cyt. We'll walk through their stuff. The Embra Cyt are a little bit different than you might expect from other regencies, insofar as they actually have a faction field, which we don't have hooked up on the website yet. And the core identity of the Embra Cyt is obviously that they have this embassy thing, which we haven't developed yet, that facilitates a number of options for you at all tiers of tech. So when you train a structure initially, you're going to get access to probably 1 or 2 units, I would imagine, from that structure. And then as you progress through the tech tree, I think their production facilities will probably go a little bit longer, a little bit farther, you could say. The Psychora ones are so far planned to only go for 2 tech tiers before they get an upgrade on average. That will also range. The Ancifi ones for sure only go for 2 tech tiers before they're replaced. The Embra Cyt ones will probably go for an average of 3, or maybe even 4 in some specific cases. And the reason for that is because they train a wide variety of different units. So I actually want it to be that there's like this one thing that you look at for all of those elements. So the embassies are probably all going to be inside infrastructure in terms of where they're located, but they will have far-reaching consequences where one embassy can unlock units in multiple branches, basically. Because each embassy will essentially unlock probably a range of a couple of units depending on your current tech level. I haven't written out the core Embra Cyt abilities yet, or the racial traits or whatever, but one of them would definitely be the embassy tech progression mechanic. Maybe that's just something I can throw on the embassy passively or something, like a given embassy. I'm also not sure how exactly I will present that information to the player, but we will have to wait and see. So, for now, we do indeed have the Strongbox, which is the town center. It trains a Handle, which is the worker, basic worker. Now, both of these are Otini, and Otini are a member nation of the Embra Cyt that are... It's not really a member nation. It's more of a, like a workhorse, basically. And then there's the Reeton, which are another member nation. Ember Nation. They've got the Goon, a classic. Just a very, like it says, expendable infantry is the role. Fairly standard fare there. You can only see the faction currently based on the weapon name, like Otini Rapid Saw, which doesn't apply to buildings, obviously. The Beggar's Bar will also unlock another Reeton unit, and the as well as generally having some other things going on here. Dude, what's up, DF? That's that humph was built up over a long while, for one, and for another is also the expenditure of humphing energy that you build up while playing shit campaigns, as we both have come to know recently. Anyway, beyond that, we have the Auteur, which is a AoE infantry, pretty small AoE. It's a beam as well, so it's a bit different than some of the other units that you'll see. And that comes from the Pattern Pod. The Pattern Pod being a heavier production facility than the Beggar's Bar. The Beggar's Bar obviously being quite cheap, actually. In fact, it costs about as much to make the Goon as it does to make the Beggar's Bar, which I think is kind of funny. So you'll see these like crop up all over the place, basically. And they really are meant to be quite expendable. But also a bit versatile, so you'll see these be relatively small structures. The Pattern Pods are a bit larger and will pump out more specialized units. The Auteur is probably the only one from the Pattern Pod that won't cost hypervials. And then there's the Professional, which is actually an Ansifi unit hired for the purposes of putting down some of the more egregious threats at Tier 1. However, their source structure, the agency, does cost hypervials, so it will take a little bit of an investment. And yeah, that's basically the current setup that we have right now. I did mention that the Embra Cyt might receive a 4th military branch. If they do, it will probably be mostly centered around utility type things. For now, I think those might end up going in infrastructure, but I'm not 100% sure yet. At any rate, that's basically the intro to the Embra Cyt, this coalition of lesser races, as it says right here. And we will indeed be running forward with a whole bunch of stuff relatively soon. Let's get to it. And hey, shout outs to the Darkened Fantasies man himself for sending me the icon processor, without which I would have been probably generating much worse icons for all of this junk that I will not actually be using in-game, but still helps for building up an idea in general for what we got right now. So, let's begin. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's Betsujin. What's up, dude? Indeed, Big Dick RTS. Big Dick Energy. Big DF. Ha! Owned. Yes, we have new resource names. We have Magmite instead of minerals, Hypervials instead of Vespene gas, I don't think we'll go beyond 2 resources, but they will have way more going on for... Oh, and by the way, you can still use ore and gas in your tech map stuff, DF. I know you're working on your own tech map stuff, for presumably for Thunder and Thunder and some other things. You don't have to change that. These are additional optional fields. So, where was I going with that? Basically, we won't be going into territory where we have more than 2 resources natively, but we will have resources, we'll have distinctions with the resources. So basically, my thought process is, you'll have some high yield resources. You'll have maybe lower yield ones, specifically from hyperlines. There will be lower yield hyperlines that don't damage your units as much, but return less resources. So those could be like a safer one where you don't actually need to build the structure on it in order to harvest it safely, because you don't need to process it beforehand. So for those unaware, there is a mechanic at play where normally you can harvest Vespian gas in StarCraft when you build a structure over it. In our case, you can harvest it at any time, including when a structure is being built over it. And once the structure is there, you must be allied to the player who has the structure built there in order to harvest from it. But while it's being constructed, you can do whatever. And before it's being constructed, you can do whatever. But until there's a structure built on the hyperline, you actually don't have the element... You don't have an element of the like safety, because they will actually damage your worker as they're being carried back home. And this obviously doesn't apply to every regency, every race in the same way, because the hyperline provides you with that damage over time if you're harvesting it unsafely. But if you have a ranged worker, or you have a worker that moves faster than another regency's worker, there you go. Suddenly, you've got yourself a quicker way to return and thus take less damage. Also, if you just have a way to repair your units, or you have a way to keep them healed in general, or give them some sort of overshield or something like that, you can imagine there's many ways to offset the effects of that. And it becomes this nice little game where if you actually see somebody harvesting hypervials in the beginning of the game, and they don't have a structure there yet, that can be a nice indication that maybe their workers are going to be a little weak, and suddenly you can run in and attack them with an early rush. You know that they won't be able to pull the workers for help in the same level of confidence. They won't be the same level of power. In many respects, like repairing and stuff like that will also just be a trade of like Magmite for hypervials, so it'll be a nice little thing there. The vials is a suffix, is a reference to the container, because it is a liquid at the end of the day, so you would have a vial of liquid. The actual element name is probably going to be not just hyper. It'll probably be something else, but it'll have been shortened to hypervials. I actually didn't put too much thought into that just yet, so that was Magmite and hypervials were just something I made very very quickly, I think. So you know how it is. I think overall, though, it's a really cool idea. Personally, I think it's a cool idea to have that unsafe characteristic. So there you go. Those are, of course, documented on the website, which I probably should have been looking at earlier while I was talking about them. If I go to resources, I still have to update resources in general. There is this node over here that I had added recently, which is nodes. The nodes where resource nodes that are depleted can actually be walked over, as long as they're below a certain cutoff point. I think the cutoff point will probably be 100 resources, because if I made the cutoff point 1 or something, then obviously as soon as it regenerates, it would block pathing again. Just gonna change up the music here. Okay. So yeah, we got the Embra Cyt. We're planning on them. I'm mostly looking forward to assembling some... where are we here? I'm really looking forward to assembling a couple more general ideas for these guys, just so I can kind of get a taste for how they're going to progress through it. Now, the reason why I decided to pivot from Psychora to these guys is because they are the subject of the first tutorial, the Embra Cyt, that is. Obviously, I was doing the Psychora because they're the subject of the first campaign, the first proper campaign. But the Ansifi, they've already escalated to the point where I can now imagine their gameplay style in general. Oh, I can refresh here to get the latest work. And yeah, in general, we've got their tutorial has already started the planning. So since I have Embra Cyt as the regency for the main tutorial, or the basic tutorial, I should say, that I imagine most people will skip. You just don't have too many opportunities to play as them in the early game, but they will also be in the early stages of the Ansifi tutorial. Like, they're in the first mission as an upstart, they're in the second mission, and second through 4, all of the subsequent missions, they're in there as an enemy. And obviously you play an Embra Cyt versus Embra Cyt matchup in the Embra Cyt tutorial. So they have a heavy presence in the early tutorials, which means I actually want some of their early stuff to feel somewhat genuine and somewhat, shall we say, intuitive. Because I don't want them to feel too arcane if they're going to be used so heavily in the tutorial and in the early game content. And they were never really meant to be massively arcane. I think the most conceptually weird stuff is going to be saved for later on in the tech tree, which is true for pretty much all of the regencies, even the ones that are conventional, as well as the ones that are just generally weird. The weird ones are going to get even weirder. It's just they started a higher baseline of weird. That doesn't mean they don't also escalate in weirdness. Yeah, for resources in general, like magmite is just a slightly cooler way to name like raw natural resources that can be turned, like natural ores and whatever that can be turned into metal. So magmite is a bit like, you could probably take that or leave it from a naming convention, but it's also M for, magmite, M for minerals. That did have an element to it, and I like magma stuff anyway in general. So it was kind of cool to think about like a way to name something like that. And then hypervials for me was just like, it sounded just way cooler rolling off the tongue. Like, I could imagine all of the responses where people are like, "Oh, we require more hypervials. Give us more hypervials." So yeah, I just imagine a bunch of lunatics yelling at, requesting hypervials. Okay, so we already have a couple of units. I think my next order of business will probably be to slap together another worker unit. Believe it or not, these guys will get a second worker unit at tier 1, but it will require an embassy. And the second worker unit will... the second worker unit is going to be pretty interesting because it will be mostly oriented around building, I think. Basically, I've come up with the idea that there's going to be workers that can build faster, workers that can do the salvage thing, workers that can fly and harvest from a range and harvest faster in general, or maybe higher yield workers. Like, the Embra Cyt is specifically going to have a ton of different workers. And also, they have team building. That's a trait that I should probably document. So before I work on that, before I work on the worker, I'm going to make a team building ability. So we'll say team building. And so we'll grab... oh, I don't even think the Cardinal still does this. This is the Mason. But I also don't think this link even means anything. We'll call Embra Cyt. Otini! Hey, what's up, Apaz? Welcome. Oh, wait, it's not called Otini, though. It's called Handle. And so we'll call this, this unit can join with other other builders. We'll say join a construction job to speed up the process. I'm not sure if we should add in like a percentage, but I just feel like each worker would add, like, just double, basically. So we'll say each additional team member increases build time by 100%. There you go. I feel like that's fairly intuitive. and resource costs by, should we say 33, 25? I think we'll say 25%, and we'll try that and see how that feels. Because that might not be enough of a penalty, but at the same time, we might lower this percentage, right? But I feel like 100% is pretty intuitive, so I don't know. What's up, Alexander? Welcome. So anyway, this is something that I will add to the handle, if I can find it. Did I hide it? Oh, no, it's right here. Embra Cyt. Oh, no, this is common team building. Yeah, I don't think used by actually does do anything. You'd have to ask Veek why it existed. Maybe he'll pop into the stream later. I've been meaning to ask him about that, because I actually have not been able to figure out why it might exist. You know how it is. Let's move this over here. Move that over there. And let's see. Since I know there has to be an embassy for the other worker, I am also going to let's close this. Let me find another icon and close that as well. I guess I can probably just use like the harvest icon or whatever for this one. Or maybe there is a better one. Let me see if I can find one. I guess it could be 235. I don't know. This is also the icon I use for carpentry, though. Yeah, I think if we can get tiers 1 and 2, or maybe even just tier 1 done for the Embra Cyt and a couple of placeholders for the Rosellium, we could do the tutorial. I mean, we would also need some environment art and stuff. Yeah, so I think at this point we'll be... I'm not actually that worried about the art. I'll tell you why. I did this, I did the channel map earlier today, which I think is what Night of the Realm is talking about in chat. Or alluding to, anyway. Because I was talking about making a demo by the end of this month. And initially, the demo is just planned to include the Cosmonarchy Brood War game state moved over with all the units and stuff, and then some stuff cleaned up in general. Some stuff we could never implement, like the Penumbra existing on a different plane, being targeted by air units. It's actually already targetable by air units, by the way. Titanic units in Cosmonarchy Brood War are just considered ground major on their plane, and in Antikythera currently, we already have air units able to target those units. It's so easy, so basic, but it can't be done in Brood War without more reverse engineering, which we just don't want to do, so... And we also don't even know where to go. Like, we already tried to do it. We got it, like, halfway working, and then we couldn't finish it, get it over the line. So, yeah, pretty ridiculous, unfortunately. Alright, I think we'll actually just leave this off for now. Trying to think of, like, degenerate names. You know, like, criminal names, basically. Like, Goon, I think, is appropriately kind of almost goofy, but, like, perhaps even cartoonish. But yeah, on the subject of art, I am getting more and more confident and comfortable, most crucially, using Blender. So those skills anyway would transfer to 3ds Max if I absolutely had to move over there. So I'm not even really worried about a potential transfer back to that. Like, now that I've actually forced myself to work on it day in and day out, it seems like eventually you just get it, right? So it's something I'm not feeling nearly as, like, apprehensive about. I'm sure the stuff that I'm going to put out is still not going to be very good, even as a placeholder, but I can at least do something, so... It's funny you mentioned Scallywag. That might be a tier 2 degenerate. I do, I like Rascal. That's a good one. I was thinking of Hooligan when I made the Goon, and Hooligan might actually come back, but Hooligan is maybe a step too far. I don't know. Also, I don't know if you guys can hear the fan in the background, but if you can, if it's noticeable at all, I will. I'll kill it because I actually was meaning to turn that off anyway. But my microphone might be filtering it out. I like Rascal for this unit because it's going to be a little bit more like a faster melee unit, and Rascal kind of makes me think about that one. So I might use Ghoul as well. Not immediately though, because Goon and Ghoul sound pretty similar. Scapegrace, I'm sure that basically means like some. That probably means like hooligan criminal type character, but I'm reticent to use it because it has the word grace in it, and it makes me think, like, I've never heard of the word before, and it makes me think that it's like actually something very epic. So it probably isn't, but it's just something that occurred to me. Aha. That could be like a cut purse or something, or a pickpocket. I don't know if cut purse fits into an RTS though. So I guess I'll use 497 for this one, but it's a bit heavier duty than I would actually want it to imply. You think so? Just because I'm plugging in some values does not mean it's going to be balanced. I'll warn you right now. But good chance that you might pick something up anyway. Let's do Rascal, Melee. Well, I do kind of like Ruffian. Even though I'm not really sure in any capacity what I would use it in. And Scoundrel's pretty standard fare, I guess. Like, Scoundrel's, it's neither overused nor arcane. I guess maybe it might be a tad cliche. Because I think it's like Scoundrel is like people use Scoundrel to refer to character, like a character archetype or whatever, right? So I guess ever since Han Solo in the OG Star Wars prequel, or prequels. Yeah. The original one. I think at some point we're going to be jumping into some pretty interesting situations, though. All right, we'll do that. I think that's fine. Close that. Actually, I think I'll save the passive idea that I had was similar to the Wendigos from a cut unit from Cosmonarchy Brood War, where it was going to deal damage. It's a melee air unit in Cosmonarchy Brood War that healed for a portion of its damage dealt. I think I'll save that for the sequel to this unit. Although these guys, even their successors aren't always going to be the same faction or anything, so there will definitely be more differences, but we'll get there. We'll get there. There, I'll use your ruffian suggestion, Alexander, but I'll use it in the name explanation there. Let's go back to the Beggar's Bar and add a link here. All of these names, of course, may be changed in the future. You never know. I know I want the Escozi to come in maybe tier 2-ish, so I could get an Escozi embassy done. I guess we'll actually name these a bit differently. Whew, you're asking the big questions all the way into the future when 20 regencies have been released. I feel like I'm kind of two minds of this concept. On the one hand, I feel like it's really, really promising to have the idea of just a sandbox of such magnitude where I, as somebody who really wants to make content first and foremost, have 20 regencies with a crazy ton of sub-factions and a really nice disparity, diaspora, story elements and stuff, right? All of the different opportunities I could do, the sub-factions, the turmoil and political upheaval and military campaigns and expansionist, quests, if you will, and, wars and all this other stuff, right? Like the sheer number of things I could look at and tell stories about with all these different moving parts. To me, that's almost paradise. There's so many different things. Like, at what point do you even need to play around with new tech tree ideas? Maybe I'll never be satisfied and I'll still be adding, more regencies even after we hit 20. I kind of doubt it, but at the same time, I have had ideas that could theoretically translate into extra regencies that we don't already have. Maybe they would begin as upstarts, and if I decided to keep fiddling around with their concepts, they could turn into fully fledged regencies. That is another option for additional content that, if it was just an upstart being added or something, it wouldn't be charged content, obviously. It wouldn't be premium content. You just get it as an update or whatever. But yeah, I mean, really the question becomes, like, do I need additional RTS do I need a different RTS to explore other things? Like, is there something that this can't do for me that I actually want to do? Because you could say it can't really serve as a framework for fantasy stories or medieval stories or even current modern stories or whatever. But I'm not 100% sure if I would ever be massively interested in those conceptually. I know some people in my audience are more into the whole fantasy, like Warcraft style thing, or Warhammer fantasy or whatever. That's never really been my personal focus. So I don't really see much of a reason to deviate. The only reason why I would want to leave the setting of Xibalba, as you're pointing out, is really if I felt like there was something that absolutely would not fit within Xibalba itself. If I wanted to have a different core gameplay to an RTS, if I wanted to experiment with that, as you say, we could have like sub games, we could have game modes, we could have start something out as a custom map that just happens to be like released through the custom map channel, but happens to be from like our work. It's our own content. That certainly could be the case, right? Now, I'm not 100% sure if I would want to stick around. I'm pretty sure like the whole reason why we're building Xibalba and Antikythera and the editor within it and all of the different elements that we're doing, the reason why we're like programming it in the way that we are so that it can be as performant as possible is so that we have a stable long-term environment to make content in. That's the primary motivation for all of this, is to make content. And the game itself is content, but then there's campaigns for that game. There's multiplayer maps, there's co-op maps, there's arcade and custom maps. There's all sorts of stuff that you could explore if you happen to have the, a solid foundation, a really good sandbox to play within, and good examples from the first-party developers will beget, people who are coming up learning from them. And do I believe that they'll, basically what it comes down to is like at some point maybe I sit back and I realize that there are enough people who have studied the content of Cosmonarchy and then practiced their own stuff and then found a way to do better than what I can do. And maybe at that point I would suggest maybe I don't want to make content anymore because the content I was making in the first place, the stories I wanted to tell and the experiences I wanted to have, I'm making them because nobody else is. So if somebody else is making them, maybe I find something else that I enjoy doing or whatever. So yeah, really, it's just it's different. It's very different. It's very an interesting idea. It really depends on how big the scene is around the game, basically, and how frequently we're able to push out the updates themselves. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to look at how it evolves. But the idea of moving on to another RTS game, only if I wanted to attempt a setting that sci-fi doesn't allow for. And even then, I'm not 100% sure that I would. I mean, it would probably be built in Antikythera, and it would probably behave very similarly artistically, like the same art style, if you will, just applied with fantasy or medieval stuff in mind. So to what extent would it really feel like a massively different one? I feel like the core mechanics would be very similar. The resources would be very similar. The lack of supply structures, the lack of selection limitations, and the scale would be the same, and so on and so forth. So to some extent, that doesn't even necessarily work unless you build the setting with that in mind for a fantasy section. Like, at least with sci-fi, you can imagine cloning can be responsible for a large portion of the units that are dying or whatever, But unless you just say oh yeah, all of the races in this fantasy setting repopulate very fast, I don't know how you're justifying millions of deaths per mission or whatever. Which maybe we can't even get to the point in our case, but I'm pretty sure we will. I'm pretty sure there will be submissions with millions of deaths. So yeah. I think the time for me to move on to another RTS seems like it would be really far down the line. Moving on to other games, though, is definitely the case. It's just that they would all be set within Xibalba, probably. I don't know if there's any game I would want to make where the story would be better served by being in another setting. It's possible that I work on another setting in the future, for sure, and maybe even likely or probable, but for me, right now, it seems like this is a really workable environment because you scale that. We talked about this in the Street Dog podcast that I did with Dynamo most recently. We just, when you're building a game world for an RTS of all things, you can scale that down to FPS as soon as you say you just say, oh yeah, in commando missions, but FPS. There you go. That's an obvious way that you could do it, right? So yeah. Anyway, that's that. All right, it looks like my Stream Deck fixed itself when I restarted the program, at least, because I was trying to mute for the sirens, but it didn't work. Okay. I think there will be a unique worker for every member nation, which is pretty insane to think about. But I guess there will probably be 5 or 6 workers per regency normally, so this isn't going to be massively deviant or deviating from that. Divergent from that, there you go. Yeah, I mean, hey, I think there's some interesting stories you can tell with that are like that a fantasy setting is more directly primed for, but I feel like the regencies in Cosmonarchy kind of cover a lot of that, where you have Kolopo Azos, for example, that could take the throne of like any sort of evil god or something, and do so with a very different flair to them. You know, because they're more mischievous and you know they are malevolent in a sense, but not in a sense where it's like deliberately desiring to be evil. More like, oh, they just do what they want, and they happen to usually want mischievous things. Um, and their idea of mischief is like, you know, untold suffering. I mean, it's definitely something I would be down to explore, even if you were the one who is doing like the world building and all that shit. I wouldn't mind coming in for level design or whatever. So, and obviously, like one of the things is that the games that everybody there are games out there that you and other people in the Frauds Club server and community they want to see made, but maybe they don't have the ability to make it all themselves. They don't have the ability that Veek does to generate an engine in a couple months that can support, you know, stuff that Brood War would never be able to, even in its wildest dreams. They don't have the maybe they don't have the immediate capacity right now to, you know, in a week generate 20 regencies like I did, and then furtherly, you know, update them over time. That stuff doesn't necessarily like it can escape them in many respects, and that I think is like is stuff that you just have to learn, right? It's like me with Blender right now. I don't have the ability that Balethal has to animate, or that you know DF has to generate meshes, or that maybe I don't know who around here does textures, but whoever that is, I don't have the ability to do textures in the same way. Like I'm in many respects, I am in a situation where the application of that side that is far beyond my current level of competence. Now, so people can either sort of like do all of the work that Veek is doing and that I'm doing, or they can pop in when the work is done to a certain extent, done enough that it can be used by them, and they can, you know, take advantage of that, right? So, I think it's totally fine to consider it from the from that kind of perspective. So, you're talking about being put in a situation where you're not like you have to learn Blender, and then you have to like generate the assets, and then do you know, this fantasy thing, and there's going to be a lot of cases where people can do some part of the work for game development, but maybe not the whole part of the work, but they have this vision like you presumably have for this really cool real-time strategy game that happens to be a fantasy setting, set in a fantasy setting. So that's cool. Like Antikythera is built for that. Like at that point, when you do the work that you yourself can do, Antikythera can do a lot of the stuff that maybe wouldn't be feasible otherwise. It can open you up to learning the programming stuff and learning like whatever is necessary to make the abilities, and it'll have this like really solid framework for a lot of things that you can learn over time, and then figure out what you need to change on a more deep code base level, and learn that over time as well. Like it opens you up to a lot of opportunities that aren't there until it's done, right? So in the same way, you know, you'll probably surprise yourself in terms of generating content, particularly single player content, because maybe you don't have the level design know-how yet, but the actual power that is placed in your hands with the editor that we're going to be providing is unmatched, basically. So I don't think it's massively like a, what would you say? You say you need right now, you would need help with single player content. I think the editor itself would be a pretty good amount of help. So don't sweat it too much, is what I'll say. Oh, by the way, DF, what might help with the insider is, the Ember Cyt, the used by field in abilities. I think one of the things that does help me realize is what the behavior applies to. It's less important for stuff that literally has the unit name in the file name, but for something like bounce attack, I might not remember exactly which unit has it, so that could be something. Sub milestone. Yeah, for some reason, the number of undo steps seems pretty low. I guess it's probably something like Photoshop where you can customize that somewhere. I haven't found it. The interface is a disaster. Everything is hidden behind some obscure click thing somewhere, and the reliance on add-ons, which in turn rely on Python, that can be pretty annoying. You get a lot of like obscure errors that I'm not 100% sure how to solve. I think everything to do with cameras seems really unintuitive right now. And for rendering as well, when you needed stereoscopy for like multi-view cameras, and then you have to like name them all and then add them and then make sure the names match. Like it seems like something that should just automatically happen. So there's a lot of stuff in there that looks and feels very clunky. I do think that you're on the right track about the destructive nature of editing being kind of messed up. I wonder if maybe there's some workflow that could account for that, where you could like save a copy of the thing so that you could restore back to that instead of having to start over completely. But that still feels like a little bit of an extra step that wouldn't be nice. It feels way less than 256 steps, but maybe that's also because it tracks selection, even if you've done nothing to it. Which I understand why it tracks selection, but that means that you should probably allow for more steps. So. Yeah, untwisting models. I've made some pretty interesting stuff so far, but I mean interesting in the sense that I was surprised I could do it at all. But nothing to really write home about so far. I have posted a couple of things, but nothing crazy yet. If I go back to the pattern pod, I can add. Do you have that render backface thing on? Because I think that's what's supposed to help you see that and change it without getting owned. It might also be something you can change in the view, but I don't know. Control Z usually helps me when I accidentally do something like that. Although it's really annoying to try to like unify and resolve or dissolve faces. It doesn't seem to work very well all the time. Nah, it's all in Alexander's art stuff. I can fire it up real quick. I've mostly been doing like tests and stuff so far, but I've made this, which if I first of all, if I turn off perspective, then I do. This is the kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where like the faces are not unified, unfortunately. So I don't actually know how to fix this. I tried doing this, dissolve faces, but obviously it just says it cannot create a merged face and then yells at me. Don't know why that's like that. This is supposed to be the weapon for the Macrolon Light Mech. It was my pass at it. It's missing a bunch of stuff on the top. And then if I just like scale, I think if I scale X, it was supposed to be like significantly thinner, according to something that was said by Night of the Realm earlier. So stuff like this, like, it was kind of interesting figuring out how to unify these faces after making the cuts. But I'm not 100% sure how to extrude in a way that's not very destructive. I think I would have to make a cut like if I was doing something like this, and I made a cut over here, right? And I don't remember. I'm doing this from memory, so this won't actually be saved. But if I was to do something like this, then I could do this, right? And then I could do something like this, this, that. You can sort of see where I'm going with that. Like if I did the same thing on the other end, I could do that. I've played around with the mirror modifier as well, but I'm not using it for this particular case. Although it probably would have helped now that I think about it. But yeah, something like this, maybe that's how I would do it, and then I would just have to figure out, again, I'm not sure 100% how to like scale down in the right angle. If I was trying to make this a little bit more curved, right? If I did something like that. Maybe that actually did do it. It kind of deformed the face over here, though, which is something I wouldn't want it to do. So I'm still figuring out how to actually engage with stuff like this. But yeah, you can kind of see where like it's pretty easy to make some quick cuts and stuff and do that. Whatever it is you need to do. It just means that you have to sort of think about some stuff. I don't think I made the trigger hole yet. Or no, this is supposed to be where... Oh no, the trigger's supposed to be here. Anyway, I won't save what I did there. But yeah, it's coming along. I'm figuring out what I need to do. It's a decent amount of like watching tutorials from people who have like make meshes pretty easily. Oh, I already closed it, but I will keep that in mind. Yeah, I haven't played around with like extruding or moving edges specifically, or like edges or whatever the other one is. But I mostly just do, oh, as vertices is the other one. I mostly just fuck around with faces. But yeah, edges is probably, like there's probably some obvious thing. That's like the biggest challenge for me is like, I know what I want to do, but I have no idea how to use this interface to get it, what I need it to do. Like if it was just receiving instructions to draw shit from my brain, it'd be so much easier. But I have to figure out how to translate that into something that the program will understand. And I'm also learning how to keep referring back to like those side views and stuff. I found out that I think it's like if you hold Control or Alt or something, or maybe Shift, there's some modifier you can do to the keys, like the top key that will go to the bottom view instead, like basically invert it, which was really useful for me to do some things. But you can only find this stuff out if you like happen upon a tutorial that explains it, or if you just search it like manually. So it's a lot of like, it's very similar to programming, I guess, in that it's a lot of looking at something and saying like, oh, I need to do something. I need to do this. I need to do that. Let me just look up how to do that. I understand that a bit more with programming because you're literally learning a language. But in this case, it's like, I would like it to be more intuitive. I just don't know if there's any way that it could possibly be more intuitive. I think part of it is that I just have to learn, and it's a visual language instead of a language of actual text. So yeah, the abstraction is a bit tough. Oh yeah, well I just usually hit G and then hit a X, Y, or Z to. But I guess it would probably be quicker to have that move gizmo always active. I feel like Sylar is. Where have I heard Sylar before? It's an acronym. I feel like it might be something from File Aggression, so I'll probably need to rename them. Brutalized. I always like to like Google and DuckDuckGo the names I'm coming up with to see if I can find anything. Should have a worker named Metalhead. I just thought of that one. Right now they're separate files, but Veek already has plans to separate the responsibility from the site entirely and generate the necessary web pages from game data. So that will actually mean that when I'm implementing all of these unit concepts, I'm actually creating entries for them in the game engine, which is way less repeated work, saves me a lot of time there. So that's where we're going to go eventually. But until we get to that point, I'm just working on the concepts so that I actually have something to look at. It will be very, very nice, though. It will be a godsend. Sub Veek. We were just talking about you, actually, and your idea to separate the, or your idea to generate the website pages from the files. It's pretty interesting stuff. And by interesting, I mean exciting. And by exciting, I mean I need it ASAP. Just so that when I'm actually generating, like, the information here, it's going to be very nice to not have to worry about that in the long run. Let's see. So I guess the worker that is unlocked by the really our embassy will probably be a ranged one, in keeping with their idea that they have higher range than some of the other units out there, which I think is pretty cool. They have a 6 ranged unit at tier 1, which is pretty high value, I think. What's up, Janshevik? Having only briefly encountered XML, I corroborate that statement. I have no idea what icon to use for this guy. I'll probably just slap him with a... yeah, I have no idea, actually. He can be a zealot, I guess. Oh yeah, we have to add the requirement. Embra Cyt B Embassy Scozy. It's already done here. But not for the timepiece. I feel like we're probably in a nice position now. We just need to add that the other workers that we've added so far. So that is the timepiece and the Araketh. So if we go ahead and jump into here. Oh. Okay. All right, so we got the handle, we got the timepiece. They all got team building, of course. Timepiece I never did a blaster for, and I never did the Araketh melee. Insider needs a description. I'm gonna crippling, we'll say dangerous, hazardous, there you go. Dangerous is a bit generic, isn't it? And then we needed the Araketh melee one. Okay. So we're starting to see a sort of something going on here. I do need to add the embassy mechanic as a note to the embassies themselves. And I wanted to add a couple of SCSI units to the tier 2 list over here. And we probably need... Oh, I never actually gave the SCSI embassy its icon. It's pretty funny. I forget which one I even picked out for it. Wasn't that one? Is it that one? Yeah, that must have been it, because it's the one that I didn't pick for the other one. Okay, now we're looking all right. So I want to add some more mercenary units. I want to put together some more... I want to put together some tier 2 SCSI units, and I also would like to settle on how the overall setup is going to work here. I think that the way that this is going to work is that units will be associated based on cost as well as embassy requirement. So obviously the SCSI embassy is tier 2 by itself, which means any SCSI unit will be at least tier 2 or higher. But there will be some units that are, say, sorted into tier 3 for the SCSI that are sorted there not because they require a tier 3 structure. They're unlocked as soon as you have the embassy, the related embassy and the related production structure. But in order to access them, you basically get arrested. In order to access them, you basically have to deal with a situation where like you just need more resources. So it's priced at a tier 3 price point, even though you technically unlocked it with tier 2. So if you think back to like how the Brood War, Cosmonarchy Brood War Protoss tech map looked, it'll be kind of similar. Where if you look at this, like there's no tech restrictions for buildings, but there are tech buildings that are listed at tier 3 because of the cost. Or tier 4 because of the cost. So it'll be kind of similar to that. And yeah. I'm feeling pretty good about the current additions. We haven't added a crazy amount of stuff, but we got there. So I'll take a BRB moment and use the bathroom and get some water. When I come back, we'll do those SCSI units, the mercenary units, and just fill out tier 1 and 2 a little bit. And hopefully we can, infrastructure has still got a long way to go for this particular regency, but hopefully by the end of this stream, we're looking at maybe... I don't know. What do we have right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. Maybe we try to double that number overall or something, At least get past past the 10 unit mark and see where we go from there. So I'll be back. Well, my Stream Deck says that everything is active and I am not muted anymore. I hope I am not muted anymore. I can't check because OBS crashed but didn't stop streaming or functioning according to my Stream Deck. So, bye. Owned. All right, let me let's get back to work, I guess. Just laugh and move on. Oh, I forgot to change the icon for the insider as well. Brutalized. That could be misconstrued. Surprised I don't actually have... I guess I can use that one. Surprised I don't have more, icons for stuff like APCs and whatnot. And any sort of thing like that, really. All right then. Oh yeah, and then obviously I have to open the unit back up. It looks like creates and created from can be blended together on the site, but enables and creates or created from can't. Basically, the blue and green and blue and red can't be blended. I don't know if that's... Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. But that would probably be useful to add. Oh, wait. Yeah. That should be what it is. I guess the mercenary branch will be a bit more conventional because you'll just get like tech structures or whatever for more mercenary units, probably, or they'll just be unlocked normally by way of embassy points. I'm still not sure how to talk about that, but I guess I'll do that here. You know, I was thinking about this too, and it would probably make sense to make it so that you have to train an embassy to benefit from any of these protection structures. So you need an OTD one and a Reeton one. The main concern I have, obviously, is if you need an Otini, well, I guess Otini makes sense as the core, so they wouldn't need one, but a Reeton one might make sense, even though they're, like, very basic. So I guess there would be, like, an Otini combat droid or something from the Beggar's Bar. I guess that would make some sense. What's up, Gonzalo? Welcome. So basically, So Cosmonarchy began as a Brood War mod called Project Hydra, long time ago, a couple of years back. This is a Brood War mod. There will be a full game called Cosmonarchy, and this will be created in our own engine, which is called Antikythera, which you can read about here, although I do need to update this a little bit, but it's written here. So it's the same name, but it's not a Brood War mod in this context. So right now I'm working on a playable faction within Cosmonarchy, the original game, and we're building this engine, basically. So it will not be a Brood War mod, obviously, because it's in our own engine. We're using some Brood War assets as placeholders, but we'll change that over time. That's pretty funny. All right, This is an ability. What are these guys named? Perilli. Okay. Probably need to tweak some of these names, to be honest. So this will be suborder 2 with Reeton 1, Rillier 3. I think that should be good, actually. We'll just go ahead and grab this and slap it in here. Sidecast rifle. All right, let me just take stock here. So I've added all of these. The Perilli one enables the auteur. The Goon is enabled by the Reeton. This also is not created by Strongbox. This is created by... Oh. Clicked on the wrong thing, didn't I? How did I manage that one? Oh, I misclicked on Goon. That's what happened. And the Rascal as well. Okay. I suppose just based on that alone, we should probably have this guy at tier 2, worker-wise. Which is fine. Okay, here we go. I'll keep basically the same stats and costs for all of these. Well, I guess that doesn't really make so much sense, does it? How about... Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll have a lot of high-scale stuff. The plan is to have, like, big team game battles with giant numbers of units, all that good stuff. And, we're probably talking about, like, each player having, like, 1,000 units or minimum in the mid-game, which is going to be really cool. It would be easier, yes, but the point is to make it so that you are not... if you want to use them... I don't know how many times we'll have units that are like that, but it's actually not that difficult to use them even in Brood War. It's just that they're very powerful in Brood War, and that's where I think the problem comes. So if you have something like a Queen, which can kill units on command, just target, kill them, that's obvious. I just think that's bad design. So you won't really see stuff like that. We might have something like Psystorm where it's an area damage or whatever, but it's already quite difficult to avoid that in Brood War. If we end up having something similar in Cosmonarchy, making it even easier to use would actually be a very heavy buff when it's just a powerful ability that has to be used correctly, and that's what limits it from being super strong. So, I think these abilities in unmodded Brood War, classic Brood War, they're actually too powerful, and they morph the game too much from a balance standpoint, from a player expression standpoint. So... I would much prefer to have more exciting, more positional things in general. That's probably what we'll do. We have the same embassy of icon, of course. Okay. That's pretty good. I'll take that. The other thing that I have to go into here is find the... I think the pattern pod is listed as Perilli as well, which it needs to be Otini. I guess I should also decide what I'm doing about this. It should be possible to build this without even being able to use it. Just so that you can start building it before you build the embassy, but... Maybe there should be a Reeton unit inside this or something. That way there's like always something super easy you can do to unlock something like this. Not sure. It's kind of weird because the embassy, the representation passive... oh yeah, the witness. I never actually made one of those. We'll do... oh, it's probably going to be a while, but we'll have a playable demo of some sort in before the end of this month, I think, or we'll say our target right now is by the end of September we should have something playable. When the time comes, I'll post a video on the channel to update people, and we talk about this stuff all the time on our Discord server. So. Did I name the weapon incorrectly? It's called rifle. Oh, it's supposed to be pistol. That's an obvious brain-dead move by me. I think we'll slap this at tier 2 based on resource cost. What it is. Hey, no problem. Thanks for popping in and asking some questions. I'm currently looking for an icon for this thing. Not easy to... Okay. I actually forget what I called the Magister. Siege platform. I see. Trying to think about what the passive for this one should be. I guess it could just be a more generic thing. It could be that multi-attack stuff. We'll say multi-attack. Wide Lord! That always puts a smile on my face. Because it's a factor of 2, I have to keep that in mind, actually, so... Should be pretty good. Okay. All right. Drop that up here. I guess I should remove the second time part of that insider passive. All right, where are we at now here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we got 11 units. I did say I wanted to pass that. We have. That's pretty cool. I was also thinking about the embassies, right? And I feel like... So I did want something like... I have to note the cost of the... I guess I could note that over here, actually. I could note... There we go. That's how we'll note the embassy representative costs. I suppose if I'm going to have the Perilli be a tier 1, no requirement stuff, they should definitely have more than one unit, obviously. But I was thinking, like... I don't know. Hmm. Though there is the other potential... What would you call it, anyway? There's the potential for people to rush straight to the agency, since it doesn't require anything, which is kind of neat. But this will be pretty interesting anyway, because it'll allow you to sort of make your own way along the tech tree, where maybe you just keep progressing up tier 1, 2, 3, you know, linearly. Or maybe you consolidate a bunch of embassies at the, like, first and second tiers, right? And then you say, all right, we're jumping up. Now it's time to, you know, get tier 3 or 4 from, well, I guess it would probably be like, if you get 5, you get 5 representatives here. If that's enough to get to tier 4 tech, you might just skip tier 3 entirely if you don't want it. So I think it's kind of interesting. But then again, the tech doesn't really work the same way. But if there's like if there's an embassy that you can get that you unlock on the way over here, but isn't really going to give you that much, it might be a better move to just grab a lower cost embassy, which I think is kind of neat. So there you go. Well, we have something going on here. I did want to do a couple of more mercenary concepts. I guess I can do one of them. I know I can make use of. Hmm. I guess I can just use the same icon that I used for that other thing. If I can find it, that is. There it is. Oh yeah, then I have to update the agency itself. Could also be bloodied instead of blood-soaked. We'll see if I decide to go for something like that, as it's a bit more sane and sensible. Okay. Well, in that case, I'm quite pleased with this. We've got a whopping 12 units, which is what I expected, and 8 buildings, so pretty nice. We'll continue this in 2 days. By then, I hope to also have some more progress on this in general, and we'll just keep smashing out the progress on these early tiers of the various factions. Once the Embra Cyt are in a reasonable enough position, something comparable to the Psychora perhaps, we'll probably be pivoting over to maybe the Keltar, maybe the Githrovin, the Makral Das, something like that. We'll just keep working on it until we get somewhere. And I guess that'll be all I have for you. So thanks everybody who tuned in. Yeah. See you in a little while. Bye-bye.